Lauren Dawson is a terrorism expert. He's also the co-director of the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, and he joins me live from Waterloo. Really glad you could take the time, Lauren. How are things going for you today?
Well, pretty busy today in terms of media.
And I'd like to get your thoughts because your organization actually had contact with Aaron Driver. So how surprised are you by the news that he had let off one device, had another that he was going to explode perhaps, and the police shot him?
Well, we really were quite surprised when we started to figure this out last night that it could likely be Aaron Driver. That's partially because, well, he definitely was an individual with very strong views, radical views, and ones that justifiably attracted the attention of the authorities. In our interview with him, which I can't say too much about because it was in the context of his legal case, the peace bond, but the overall impression we gained of him is that he wasn't necessarily violent, and he himself asserted that he wasn't a violent person. So we thought he was pretty much strongly in the camp of talk and support and holding strong views, but not actually himself likely to do anything.
So you were wrong.
Well, we were, but it's very hard in these circumstances to make these judgments. The research record overall shows that a very large number of people talk radical ideas and a very small percentage act on those ideas, and we've never been able to figure out very effectively exactly what the difference is, how people cross over into action. I suspect here, but it's just a suspicion, is that the peace bond itself may, in this case, have aggravated the circumstance. Now, that doesn't mean it shouldn't have been imposed. It was the only recourse the police had. But once he was isolated, then instead of moderating his views, it may have caused him to cling even more tenaciously to his views and pushed him further.
Because why? When somebody is under a peace bond, there are pretty strict conditions attached to that bond, right?
Well, the one thing that's clear is that this is not true of all individuals, but it's true of a certain clear percentage. He definitely come from a personally troubled background. He was a young man who was fairly bright and articulate, but really struggling with a sense of who he was and what he was supposed to do in life. He had lots of issues he was struggling with, and it had lapses into problematic behavior throughout his life. And when he converted to Islam, it's clear that that had become the sort of new restructuring focus for his life. And he really was quite tenaciously hanging on to an extreme interpretation of Islam as a way of giving him focus and purpose in life. So he was very dependent on his online contacts with other people that shared his views. And having that online contact removed, I think maybe in his case, removed any kind of support system, and may have caused him to feel very isolated and, his back against a wall.
So what do you do then?
Well, this is where, regrettably, in Canada, unlike Germany, Denmark, Holland to some extent, and in the UK, we need to, if we put people in peace bonds, that's great, but we also need to put them into contact with individuals who are trained to be able to counsel them and assist them, right, and talk to them and attempt to move them away from their radical perspectives, to guide them towards expressing their intense religiosity in somewhat more constructive ways. Regrettably, in Canada, we have a few piecemeal efforts happening across the country, but so far we don't have any kind of concerted national effort in this regard. The Liberal governments are promising it, and I think, in all honesty, they're making very strong measures to bring it about, but it's not there yet. And we're several years behind other countries in that regard.
Final question for you, Lauren. What's the research show when it comes to radicalization of young people or people who are actually born in Canada? We do know there is so much interest in those who come to Canada from other countries and finger pointing, etc. But what does your research show about the Canadian-born radicalized individual?
Well, of course, all over the world, we're seeing people who are second-generation immigrants. So, I mean, they themselves were born in Canada, and that's certainly true for many of the prominent figures in Canada that have gone off and died fighting for ISIS in Syria. And then the other category that Aaron Driver fits in is the converts. And we have, of course, in Canada, we have Andre Poulin, we have John Maguire, we have a whole series, Damien Claremont, a whole series of quite prominent converts to Islam who have, you know, gone the whole way in terms of their radicalization. They've managed to make their way to Syria, and they've died in suicide attacks or been killed in battle. Now, these individuals, all we can say in most cases is that it definitely is about them struggling to figure out some kind of, you know, it's going to sound light saying this, but it really comes through in the research. Certain individuals just have a harder struggle with sort of basic existential issues. They're young and they really want to have an important role in life. They want to have a point and purpose, and they can't find it through our conventional means. Conventional teenage life just doesn't satisfy them, and they start this quest for something more dynamic. And today, if you go online, the people who are willing to give you an answer to those kinds of questions are disproportionately promoting these jihadist viewpoints.